First, viewing the current society, system, industry norms, and such things skeptically, I would like to take the challenge of first breaking those, then constructing new rules, a new society by ourselves.
すごく朝は早く起きます。
I wake up very early in the morning. Generally, first in the morning, I'm a businessman. I get to the company very early and first check both company and non-company emails. Then I attend the business meetings of the parent company, followed by the business meetings of Kojima Productions. Including checking various things, that eats up most of the morning. The creative time starts in the afternoon. In the afternoon, I write scenarios, check things, and doing things like that generally goes until the evening. Since every day I try to look at and feel various things, naturally, watching movies or reading books are great for being simple. But even when I can't do such things, I revitalize myself as much as possible by always stimulating myself with things like facing the opposite way while walking the same streets, connecting that to creating.
物心ついた頃だからまあいつそういうこと思った
For as long as I can remember, I can't recall when I did, but ever since I was a young child, I wanted to become an artist. After starting to read books, I wanted to become a novelist. After starting to watch movies, I wanted to become a movie director. So I feel like coming into contact with and getting taken in by some kind of different work made me head towards that world of gaming. In my case, when I was a young child, there weren't computer games. I came into contact with games much later and wanted to become a game designer at a later stage, around the middle or the later half of my teenage years. With that said, as an individual, as an amateur, I was writing novels and recording 8mm films with my friends. But the point is that there was no internet like now. Therefore, I couldn't show them to many people at all. Since entering this industry and joining Konami, I required the basis of having my creations distributed globally, or more like people playing them. Therefore, I created things with that in mind. I made the first Metal Gear being strongly conscious of that. Originally, instead of aiming for the game industry, I rather wanted to become an artist, a sculptor, or a novelist, maybe a movie director. As I was distressed by wanting to become a movie director, but not being blessed with such an environment, I met with computer games, the Famicom, and that's how I got here. I was challenging myself by creating things at an amateur level, but becoming able to make games and distribute them globally as products is what the medium called games means for me.
僕にとってのゲームという媒体になります。まあそれこそ30年ぐらい前のゲームっていうのはその
Games about 30 years ago didn't have nearly enough expressiveness. They only had a few colors, and instead of 3D, they were 2D pixel art. There were no voices or music. I think that, among other things, the main job of a game designer was to make rules. Just like in chess and shogi, since in chess the knights can't be moved, they had no choice but to decide the knight's movement. It's the same with playing cards. They made the rule that king is stronger than the queen, but if the queen and king actually fought, who knows who would win? Designing those ambitious points with the rules was what games in the past did. But recently, with the heightened expressiveness, the game characters are in 3D, are solid, speaking with expressions, hand gestures, movement, and that's what made it possible to depict nations and cultures. Therefore, rather than rules, in game design, the question is, what can really be done within a virtual space? That creating method, as well as the creators and the demands of the players, have all changed quite a lot in my opinion.
実際の僕が子供の頃っていうのは
In my childhood, there weren't computer games yet. So the first games must have been something like Space Invader. Prior to that, games using mechanics, like the ones where cars are running on top of a conveyor belt, or where you beat shadow figure-like enemies with fighter planes. I was really into mechanical games like that. When I was a kid, there were such games on the roof of every department store, and I remember playing with them a lot. I feel like that for me, those were the first games I came into contact with.
そこではなかったかなと思います。進化というか、当然表現も高まっていきますし。
An evolution, or rather, naturally they are becoming more expressive. And the operational feeling is also going through changes, I think. If anything, besides the online and social games that are spreading now, the separation between movies, music, and games will disappear.
僕の場合は操作感ですね。特にアクションゲームはその
For me, the operational feeling, especially in action games, pushing the lever right makes the character and the player lean right, and I think that great feeling of controlling your alter ego is very important. In adventure games and simulations too, having your input without having lag on the output, in the computer world that is, and having it all being highly consistent without latency, is very important in my opinion.
が一番重要だと思います。僕もそのゲームの中でストーリー
I also look for a story in games. But what is in fact very difficult is that, unlike in the case of movies and novels, in games we are aware of taking actions by ourselves. In movies, we are following the main character above their head. Without having our own will, we simply remain a spectator stuck to the main character. In the case of games, our intention is working by going right and going left on our own will. Therefore, even in a virtual space, we are making decisions. We do things by ourselves. That is the most important. So even though now games only have really simple stories, in the end, the user has a sense of acting within that by themselves. In that sense, rather than the storytelling, the sense of responsibility of their actions inside the story, their intentions are a lot stronger than with any other media. So I think that's the strength of games.
あると思います。両方だと思います。
Just like in other industries and other entertainment areas, there's no point in making something the users don't want. So when creating something innovative, I think it's very important to keep it in a range the users can accept. So even if we made something completely new, since it's interactive, the users probably wouldn't take it. Now, car wheels are round, but if they turned into squares or triangles, it might be really hard to drive. So bending the rules and saying that triangle wheels are now the new thing is likely not possible within games. So thinking about that, the creator is slightly above the users, and the users are following him or her. I think that high-quality games can only be made like that.
当然経済的っていうか僕らはその
Of course, economically, since we are game creators in the game business, we don't want them to disappear. Rather than clearly games and movies, I think that digital technology based entertainment is what games are. So I believe that, of course, games itself won't disappear. Music became digital too, films became digital too. Texts are also becoming digital. In that sense, if games disappeared, entertainment would disappear from this world as well.
存在はしていると。インタラクティブなメディアなので。
Since it's an interactive media, I don't think it's what is called art. I think it's rather a service industry using artistic materials. I think that we provide a service for the customers to make them happy. So we can't force our service on the customers. I think modern art also has a side like that. But since ours is a service industry, that's the difference. Still, even if saying that, since we use technology, we use images and sounds, I think we could use the word comprehensive art. Still, modern art, as of paintings and sculptures, the creator 100% conveys their own sense as a creator. But even if it doesn't get through in the world of modern art, that is okay. However, since we are using interactive media, if we create a car that the player can't drive, then that's not a game. So it is a sort of art and sort of not art.
まずその
There is a difference between the service of Japanese and Westerners. In Japan, there's what is called omotenashi, the service of offering what the person wants, or doing so with great attentiveness is considered a virtue. Serving a cup of water, even if the customer doesn't say a thing, the service of us Japanese people is like that. In the West, it isn't like that. But actively playing by themselves, creating their own way of playing or finding it, it is a rather positive culture in my opinion. So I think the starting point to begin with is different. Therefore, the game design that satisfies Japanese people is very easy to understand. There is a tutorial, the road widens in order to show more crossroads and more doors appearing. It is a game design like that. In the West, this approach is considered as having a very low level of freedom. So the mainstream game design is throwing the player into an empty space, making them find the way out, or refine the controls by themselves. So first, that is a huge difference. Then, well, to put it another way, it's just not about games, but it's also Japanese movies, Japanese novels. Japanese game developers are all the same. They're all Japanese. Portraying Japanese people has a market only in Japan. So that, in and of itself, limits the budget. Making games for a global market like Hollywood is something we can't really do. Not being able to spend a budget means we can't use that technology. So I think that will be a task to work on from now on. The Japanese game developers, who despite being Japanese, make games set around the world, portraying people and cultures from around the world. We were also like that before. Instead of a market-driven approach, having a creator-driven approach. The creators make what they want to. Then once it's complete, they hand it over to the marketing team and have them sell it. That's what we used to do for a long time. In the West, especially like Hollywood movies, there is the marketing, and they make a plan that suits that, adjust the whole schedule to it, and develop the game based on that. So after all that was a huge difference. It was also true about Japanese movies, but nowadays Japanese developers work differently, integrating the good aspects of the Western model into their creating process. I'm often asked this, but even though I'm Japanese, as a child I was raised with comics, movies, novels, and music from around the world. So actually, I'm not that interested in things set in Japan. Therefore, I like stories with a global setting, portraying people from around the world. So even now, I don't really think about because of being Japanese or because of being Western.
やっぱりボタンでも何でもいいですけど自分がある
by pushing buttons or whatever, having an effect of taking an action, that interactivity, to put it that way. I think there's no other medium like that, no other medium to get so devoted to. If they had existed in my childhood, then probably I would have played games all the time, too. But for better or worse, I met with games in my late teenage years. So I actually wanted to make movies, but now games are more interesting. So even now, I'm still making games and playing games. I think that's what is so attractive about it, that if 100 people play it, then it unfolds in 100 different ways, with a completely different process. So I think there is no other medium like that.